Starting us off at number 10 is the Afterlife CUL-DE-SAC. So what is the only show on Cartoon Network set in a cul-de-sac? Ed, and Eddie. Double D was my favorite, let me just put it out there. He deserved more lines and appreciation, I'm just saying. Anyway, this theory is actually wild. It claims the kids who lived in the cul-de-sac are actually all dead, and the neighborhood is some kind of afterlife / purgatory. Since all the kids are different ages, they all died between 1900 and 2000, but because they all died in the cul-de-sac, they all stayed there. Think about it, the show has no other kids, no parents, just the kids we see, and even they are a bit weird. I mean, they all look a bit sickly, they all have blue tongues, which like hello, corpse tongues. Okay, say if we had to analyze the kids, Rolf is farm obsessed and tends to his animals, so he probably died in the early 1900s. Ed and Sarah were from the 50s because Sarah is controlling as hell and Ed is a dumbass who simply thrives on comics, which were very popular at the time. Naz is a 60s or 70s child, obviously she's carefree, a bit of a flirt, you get the gist. And Kevin was a 90s kid because he's a bully, he rides his bike as an escape, and his dad was most likely controlling and abusive, which is why in the afterlife he imagines his dad showering him with a lot of gifts. Now I'm not saying this is a foolproof theory, but I'm also not saying that.
Number 9. Arthur. I swear, DW, she made me more angry growing up than my own siblings did. Ooh, Dora Winfred Reed. Nothing but trouble she is. Another gem from our childhood. This animated family epic began in 1996. It officially ended a month ago. Apparently that was a nice surprise. Woke up, checked Twitter one morning, Arthur's like a hipster now in a cafe. Muffy's running for mayor. Buster's a teacher. Are we old? We're old. I'm old. Oh, I knew it. While the show was running this whole time, the showrunners had tons of backlash for one episode in particular, appropriately titled Bleep. The whole episode is centered around DW, of course, as she learns a curse word. We don't know what it is, of course, but she says it a lot. There's a lot of bleeps in this episode. Executive producer Carol Greenwald said in an interview recently that the episode received the most mail-in feedback out of all of them. Yeah, they got letters, handwritten letters. I remember this episode, I remember seeing it, and I'm now doing stand-up comedy and cursing quite a bit, so more than fair, that's a good call. My mom was probably one of those letters, she's like, oh, okay. Number 8, Sailor Mouth. Yeah, remember this one? Arthur moms weren't ready for this one, not at all. Again, another episode I clearly remember watching. I hope you do as well, that's why I picked these. It's one of the most controversial when it comes to Bikini Bottom. Sailor Mouth, yeah, we're out here getting upset because Dora Winfred Reed learned one curse word. Well, in season 2, episode 28, SpongeBob learned them all. All of them, all 13. Originally, SQUAREPANTS learns one word from reading the back of a dumpster, you know, behind the Krusty Krab, just a great place for education. And he says it, and a dolphin sound is heard. And the garbage man nearby is like, I have never. He's like a YouTube thumbnail, he's like, oh. Patrick convinces SpongeBob that it's a sentence enhancer, but Mr. Krabs later corrects them. As a punishment, Mr. Krabs makes the dirty duo paint the Krusty Krab over, but when Mr. Krabs stubs his toe and says all 13 forbidden words, well, now he's in trouble. The 3 Sailor Mouth vigilantes then have to go and paint Mr. Krabs' mom's house as a punishment. It's funny, but yeah, same issues. Parents believe this one was encouraging foul language. To this day, it's one of the most controversial episodes Under the Sea. Again, I have to agree. That was a rhyme. Under the Sea, I agree. Number 7, Stokey the Bear. Let's get stoked for this one. In many cartoons growing up, there was always a hidden message, or a very obvious, clear message. Like, you know, preventing forest fires, for example. It's a pretty obvious message when it comes to our pal Smokey the Bear. That's his one message. He kind of nails it, I don't know. The United States Forest Service wasn't too pleased when the second episode of Dudley Do-Right of the Mounties parodied their safety bear. This parody aired during the Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle episode 16, so a lot of people saw it. The whole episode is like a bizarro version of Smokey. The punchline in this episode was that he was responsible for the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Yeah, not a great bit. That's not funny. I don't know. The episode was obviously pulled and hasn't seen the light of day ever again. Yeah, can't show kids lighting fires in forests. I was gonna insert a link, but I'm like, actually, don't. Hit that thumbs up for safety. If you wanna see the link, hit that thumbs up instead. No fires in this house. Number 6, The Mask of Matches Malone. Mask matches Malone. It's kind of like a tongue twister. Going back to the nerd days for this one, here we go, let's go. The Brave and the Bold is an animated Batman series. It's actually amazing. The respect I have for DC with their animated series and their comics, they're dark, they're great. They've always been dark and they've always been great. But sometimes with the cartoon, you can cross the line with the content, even if it's lighthearted. For example, Brave and the Bold came after Batman the Animated Series. It was supposed to lighten up the mood, but an episode that only appears on season 3's DVD bonus features a Birds of Prey song. A nice catchy song to get stuck in your head. How fun. We love those. Catwoman, Huntress, Black Canary, they all do this fun musical number, just absolutely roasting the Justice League. The content was inappropriate. It was sexual in nature, something about Aquaman and a little fish, you know, you can connect those dots in your head. The jokes were great, but certainly not for a cartoon. The 2020 Birds of Prey movie was rated R, you know what I mean? So sometimes the content has to be harsh in order for it to be comic accurate. Number 5, Pokemon. Ooh, lots of nostalgia for this one. Here we go. Gotta catch them all. This was a staple of my childhood. Pokemon is great. Apparently I can't get enough, even as a 27-year-old. I see Pokemon Go in the App Store and I'm like, do I do it? Do I commit? My data plan's like, no, you do not commit. Go, get out of here. I want to be a speed walker and collect them all. So tempting. An episode that aired in 1997 was titled Electric Soldier Porygon. It was all but fun and games, really. It was pulled off the air almost immediately because these bright strobe-like animations. Yeah, it was causing seizures. This is an issue that can repeat itself even today. When I saw Incredibles 2 in theaters when it first came out, opening night, you know what's up. There's a scene where the villain, Screenslaver, is fighting Elastigirl, but there's crazy flashes the entire time. It's supposed to confuse Elastigirl, it's the whole point. Disney Pixar had to edit the scene and then re-release it because of medical issues, just like the same thing with Electric Soldier Porygon. So, it can even happen today. We're not learning it. Number 4, Gargoyles. Another staple from my childhood. Here we go. What a fun list. Allow me to do more, please. Hit that so I can do more into my childhood. Here we go. Born the same year as I was, Gargoyles kicked off in 1994. Gargoyles who come to life at night and protect the city. What's there not to love, honestly? Concept art for the canceled live-action Disney movie had the internet buzzing recently. And with Disney Plus being so successful, never say never to a live adaptation. Just don't expect it to be the season 1 episode titled Deadly Force. That probably won't make it into the final script. Again, I'll reinforce that cartoons, their first objective is to send a message. Sometimes that message is just too dark in nature. A cartoon like Gargoyles explaining the dangers of firearms, yeah, they had good intentions, but listen to what I just said. Obviously, it's gonna be scary. When the human detective Eliza is severely injured and barely survives emergency surgery, the staff still views the episode as a teachable moment. So on Disney XD and Toon Disney, the scenes are recut. So now you just see Eliza's face the whole time, instead of the horrible scene that they originally released. Yeah, it's still jarring to see just her face in a horrible situation, so yeah. The whole message is don't play with firearms, but like honestly, it's so scary. Way more haunting, but I don't know. Number 3, Garbage Pail Kids. A little older than this lanky guy here, but I still had some Garbage Pail fun growing up. I was still involved. These trading cards were the talk of the town in the late 80s. They were a gross parody, of course, of the Cabbage Patch Kids. We love gross alternatives, yes. My sister had an Easy Bake Oven, and me and my brother had the Queasy Bake Oven. Yeah, we're eating worms tonight, folks. Queasy Bake, wah, 90s, so 90s. It's like, whoa, worms and dirt. It's like, just, I like nice things too. I don't know. I don't want to eat dirt and like gross stuff. I want a cupcake. That looks delicious. Uzi Susie and the Gang. This was the grossest card game ever. So when the show launched, what do we expect, really, honestly? The 1987 show was deemed too gross for America. Action for Children Television reached out. Christian Leaders for Responsible Television also reached out. And before the show even got momentum, it was canned. Pun intended. I waited for that pun too. It's the first thing I put in that script. Number 2, Dexter's Lab. As if the last few weren't bad enough, this one somehow is worse. Swear-wise. What's happening? Why are cartoons getting so angry? I didn't see this one growing up, but maybe that's a good thing, honestly. Dexter's Laboratory. I could still hear his little voice in my head. This show was iconic. This and Powerpuff Girls had some sort of energy that you just honestly can't find anymore. Sometimes too much energy, like in the episode titled Rude Removal, for example. Dexter uses his big old brain to separate the rudeness between him and his sister. So now they have clones who have New York accents, who curse a lot. So obviously it didn't work out. And New York, New York! Kids are watching, eating cereal, they're like, oh, nice. Why is he so aggressive? This episode wasn't even aired. The profanity that they did censor was still obvious. You could still make out what they were saying. At least Arthur forced you to get creative. This one was just, you know, this was just all bad. And finally, number 1, the Powerpuff Girls. I mentioned them for a reason, our lovely number 1 on today's list. Seeing as the Powerpuff Girls show was just canceled on CW pretty recently, I figured we'd dive into the scandal vault with this one. The animated Cartoon Network classic kicked off in 1998. Blossom Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. It's odd from the get-go, this show. There's a dude, lots of sugars, lots of spices, lots of everything nices. It's pretty wacky at times. It gets really insane. The characters are bold. Little odd, but it's fun. Season 5's episode titled See Me, Feel Me, Know Me was a big musical episode. At least it was supposed to be. The trio meets a magical gnome. He causes trouble to the town and the girls save the day. As far as Powerpuff Girls episodes go, this was pretty tame. The episode was not allowed on US airwaves because the metal beams and the destroyed buildings looked like crosses. And one of the dudes apparently looked like Jesus. So it couldn't be aired because, I mean, obviously fair. That's more than fair. But if you want to see the Lord's work yourself, the episode is still available online on some platforms.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Simpsons. So for this one, we have this rumored lost episode of The Simpsons that is said to be titled Dead Bart. Basically, rumor has it that this episode is based on the idea that Matt Groening has this ability to accurately predict the death of all of the guest stars from the show. I mean, it seems really far-fetched, of course, but we've also seen scenarios where The Simpsons somehow accurately predicted something long before it happened. Anyways, this episode is said to have been aiming at putting this ability on full display by having it be animated to show each of the regulars or the stars of the show future death dates. Yeah, a little morbid, right? So, according to internet legend, the show featured Bart being ripped out of a plane through the window. Okay, not great. This leads to his family going into mourning for a full year until they are nothing but skeleton versions of themselves. It is also said that the graveyard where Bart is buried is full of tombstones, all of which have the death dates of every Simpsons guest that had ever and will ever appear on the show.
Coming in at number 9 are the post-apocalyptic Flintstones Part 1. Again, one of my favorite shows. I even saw the old live action remake and loved it. Have yet to go as Betty for Halloween, but soon come, I promise. Anyway, based off the show, you'd assume Bedrock was situated in the Stone Age. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're called the Flintstones, they live in Bedrock, this is basically Stone Age propaganda. Either way, this theory claims they actually live in a post-apocalyptic society. Now think about it, the show is basically based on the modern West. They reference technology, religion, culture all the time. Stone Age people didn't have any of that. The theory goes on to say after many nuclear disasters, the entirety of Western civilization collapsed, and so the generations after them recovered just enough to create a society based on what they remembered. At number 8, we have the post-apocalyptic Flintstones Part 2. I love when the theories are so juicy they need a part 2. I'm just sat there like, yes girl, yes! Anyways, this sub-theory features the crossover we all died for. The Jetsons meet the Flintstones. I wanted to be in the Jetsons so bad. When I watched it when I was young, I literally thought by now, like by 2019, we'd be living in a world like that, yet we still even have like flying cars or houses. This is shocking. Well, I've been fed lies. This is a betrayal. Either way, moving swiftly on before I get further triggered. The theory goes on to say the Flintstones and the Jetsons actually lived in the same world at the same time. In this post-apocalyptic society they live in, we became so divided that one group live in a super advanced society, whereas another group is barely hanging on the edges of technology. All the talking animals living with the Flintstones are synthetic creations. I mean, all the real animals have been extinct for 5 ever, and no one acknowledges how stupid it is for them to talk to things that didn't even exist with early humans. But you know, that's none of my business. Filling our number 7 slot is Scooby-Dooby Depression. I literally bought all the extra Scooby-Doo long episode movie things as a kid, and I can't tell you how many times I've watched both live action movies. That is my shit. But either way, from their slang, all the flowers on the mystery machine, even the gang's clothing, you can tell the show was set in the 60s. And the theory claims that it was set during one of the worst economic depressions ever. And if you think about it long enough, it actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, in the show, everything is either falling apart or abandoned. Hotels are empty, theme parks are ruined, every villain they catch is actually someone who would normally be respected, you know, like a teacher or a scientist or a historian, but they've just fallen on hard times and have just turned to petty crime in this dark period of life. And no, I definitely didn't forget about the gang. You'd think they were just hippies out looking for adventure, but really they're like in their late teens, early 20s, not interested in getting proper jobs. They move around all the time because there are no jobs available no matter where they go. They wear the same clothes every day. Do they shower? No one really knows for sure. Do they pay for petrol? I don't know. In conclusion, they're unemployed hobos that accept petrol and food for helping those around them. Knife in my heart. dagger in my chest. Now at number 6 is the Rugrats affair. Now this was a cute show, I'm not gonna lie. It wasn't my favorite because I thought I was just too grown up for that baby stuff, but it did the job. According to this theory, which I'm sure many of you have heard before, most of the babies on the show aren't real apparently. They're all figments of Angelica's imagination since she actually has no friends. That sounded really savage, I didn't mean it like that. Angelica, you're a lovely girl. She makes up these friends to make up for the fact her parents are too busy working to make time for her. Angelica bases all her friends on the dead children of her parents' friends. I don't know how believable that bit was, but we carry on anyway. Tommy was stillborn, which explains why Stu is always in the basement making toys. Chucky died with his mum, which explains why Chaz is a nervous wreck 24/7, and Phil and Lil were actually aborted or their parents suffered a miscarriage. So because Angelica didn't know the baby's gender, she just created twins. What do you guys think? Viable or Coming in at number 5 is Courage the Cowardly Delusion. Now this was my least favorite show on the channel and I never wanted to watch it. Who makes a kids show that creepy and dark? I don't get it. Courage was definitely its own niche, and this theory claims Courage was actually Cerberus the Hellhound. Think about it, his only goal in every episode is to protect Muriel and Eustace and the house in the middle of nowhere. Their house is legit in the middle of a barren hellhole, so Courage aka Cerberus always stays in hell, which is nowhere, to protect mankind aka Muriel from the underworld, which is characterized by all the villains he meets. LeQuack representing greed, Cats representing hate, and etc. And if you're wondering where that leaves Eustace, he's Hades and he rules over and hates everything in hell. And honestly, I can totally see this theory being true. You guys, I wouldn't even bat an eyelid, I wouldn't even be surprised. At number 4 is Inspector Gadget versus Inspector Gadget. I only remember watching this show while having breakfast and getting ready for primary school in the morning. Like I don't recall it ever being on in the evening. Is that just me? Let me know. Either way, Inspector Gadget was always up against his arch nemesis Dr. Claw, but we never got to see his face. It's like Miss Bellum in the Powerpuff Girls, like that fat, I know she's gonna be hot, just show me her. Sorry, got sidetracked, but you know, when she's slim thick, she's slim thick, you know? Either way, this theory claims there's a very specific reason we never get to see Dr. Claw, because he is the original Inspector Gadget. Gasp! The original Inspector Gadget was actually a cop who died on the job, but he was the police force's best guy and they couldn't bear to part with him. So they built a robot that acted and looked exactly like him, but there was one problem. The guy never actually died, he survived, and when he saw that he was replaced with a robot, he became bitter and turned into the notorious Dr. Claw. I mean, it explains why they're never in the same place at the same time, so you never know. Filling our number 3 slot is Samurai Utonium. I can proudly say I think I've seen nearly all the Powerpuff Girls episodes, and thankfully I tried to avoid Samurai Jack as much as possible, but I heard they rebooted it a few years ago, hope that's good. But can we just acknowledge the fact that Jack is literally Professor Utonium but with a man bun and a katana? Like, this theory claims that Jack and Professor Utonium are the same person, and that during his final showdown with Aku, Jack and him are launched into a time portal that Aku himself created. By using all his dark power, Aku gets turned into a liquid version of himself, which translates to Chemical X in a new world and time period that Jack aka Professor Utonium now lives in. Jack/Utonium dedicates his life to studying Chemical X and eventually makes good use of Aku by creating the girls. So he was evil, but the girls combat that, so it just really comes full circle, doesn't it? Now at number 2 is Foster's Home for Imaginary Blank Part 1. I absolutely loved Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. It was so cute and funny and refreshing, and all the little imaginary friends were just little gems. Either way, the premise of the show is that kids have imaginary friends that everyone can see and we all just kind of coexist. When kids outgrow their imaginary friends, they give them to Foster's Home, created by Madam Foster. It gives the imaginary friends shelter and the option to get adopted by new kids. Now, Madam Foster runs the house with her granddaughter Frankie and her own imaginary friend Mr. Harriman. This theory argues that Madam Foster isn't real. She died due to old age and Frankie was heartbroken and just couldn't get over the loss. So she probably imagined Madam Foster so no one would find out at the home because she was so dearly loved. I mean, this honestly explains why Madam Foster is always so childlike and energetic despite being ancient. It also ties in with why Frankie just can't move on from her life at Foster's because the home is actually hers. Finally, at number 1 is Foster's Home for Imaginary Blank Part 2. The juiciness of the theory continues, but the twist here is that Frankie is actually the imaginary friend, not Madame Foster. The other side of this theory argues Frankie is just a younger version of Madame Foster. They're even wearing the same thing. Madame Foster imagined up Frankie because if it was up to her, she would have been a lot younger when managing the home, but she's just too old for it now. Think about it, Frankie never has imaginary friends of her own, she doesn't even want one. She acts human, but she's most likely not. And it also explains why she's so happy staying at the home looking after everyone instead of going to college or something, for example. Both are completely plausible. Who do you think is imaginary, Madame Foster or Frankie?
Kicking off the list at number 10, SpongeBob SquarePants. Season 9, episode 11. Yeah, the sea sponge was well on his way when the scandals hit this time. SpongeBob kicked off in 1999, also a childhood favorite of mine. I'm growing into Squidward now. I feel it mentally and physically. I'm like, I've got these long squid-like tentacle arms. The 11th episode of the 9th season was titled You're Fired, and apparently it sent all the wrong messages. This is quite controversial. Mr. Krabs learns he can save a nickel, literally, by firing the fry cook SpongeBob SquarePants. Patrick tries to cheer SpongeBob up by having fun all day around town, goofing around, more or less ignoring some adult responsibilities, and at the end of the episode he chills out. He starts applying to other restaurants, whatever. Political debate surrounded this one. Apparently it was sending the wrong messages to our youth about the responsibilities of being a working adult. Listen, I get that. He's also a sponge. Also, maybe let's not forget why SpongeBob got fired in the first place. Like, let's talk about that more, maybe. Also, does Patrick even have a job? Let's get some resumes going for him before we give SpongeBob a hard time. Guy's the only cook. Give him a holiday.
In our number 9 spot today, we have SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay, how could an episode of SpongeBob be scary? I mean, that jolly little sponge is like a ray of sunshine anywhere he goes in Bikini Bottom, but apparently there is one episode that is not like the others. Internet rumors have suggested that there is a lost, dark, eerie episode of SpongeBob that we are all definitely glad we haven't seen. Rumor says that this episode never even made it to the final edit because it was so dark. The rumor of its existence stems from someone who claims to have seen the episode while doing an internship with Nickelodeon. This episode is said to deal with really serious topics like death and maybe even Squidward taking his own life, which honestly is really messed up. The episode thankfully never made it to air, and it is said that while there was an investigation into the footage, nothing ever ended up coming of it. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Peanut Vendor. The Peanut Vendor was made in 1933, and it's a really short animated film and just shows a monkey who's singing a song. This sounds cute, but I assure you, it is the stuff of nightmares. The monkey is selling peanuts and a song is about how he is only there for a limited time, so everyone should come and buy some before they go to sleep. This all seems very reasonable, except for the fact that this animated monkey character does not look like a monkey at all and instead looks absolutely horrifying. If you put this guy next to Jason Voorhees, I feel like I would still be more scared of whatever he is. I feel like I do not want to buy his peanuts, but I'm afraid that if I don't, he's gonna come and find me. I truly didn't know that a 2-minute animated video could be this creepy, but they certainly delivered. In our number 7 spot today, we have Tom's Basement. Tom and Jerry is an absolute classic. What a silly little show with a great dynamic. Tom was of course the bloodthirsty cat, while Jerry was the quick, clever mouse, but apparently things for both of them turned sinister in a rumored lost episode called Tom's Basement. It is said that this lost episode was actually a short, and internet legend says that in the episode, Tom's owner told him to stay out of the basement. In fact, this owner is definitely a terrible person and is said to actually harm Tom in the episode anytime he gets near the basement door. Legend goes that Jerry ends up using this to his advantage and he starts to make Tom chase him into the basement, where he then hides while this terrible owner loses his temper. In the end, it is said that this situation continues to escalate and it leads to Jerry killing this guy. Him and Tom then end up hiding the body in the basement, and Jerry goes on to also kill Tom. I mean, what in the world? I'm just glad this episode isn't around anymore. In our number 6 spot today, we have CATDOG. CATDOG is actually a cartoon I can remember watching when I was a kid, and I remember it scaring the heck out of me. CatDog is half cat, half dog creature that gets itself into situations and has quite the time figuring everything out, considering the cat half and the dog half can't seem to get along with each other. This is just a weird premise in general, but it's not the strangest part of the show. There is an episode when Cat wants to brush Dog's teeth, and he crawls into his own mouth and travels through his own body to get to the dog side, where he then comes out of Dog's mouth. So now, Cat is hanging out of Dog's mouth, inside out, with veins and muscles and everything we never wanted to see exposed. I know this was probably just meant to be like a silly little thing, but it's actually really scary and just a lot for anyone to even begin to try and comprehend. Maybe I'm looking into it a little too much as an adult, but overall this show just has a very weird vibe. In our number 5 spot today we have the Kitchen Casanova. The Kitchen Casanova was made in 1996, great year, and was a part of Cartoon Network's What a Cartoon series. Basically it's about a guy who's trying to prepare dinner for his date, but he's exceptionally nervous, and of course Murphy's Law would have it that everything is going wrong. This cartoon was actually eventually pulled from air because of the fact that at one point he accidentally slices off his fingers and blood goes spurting everywhere, which probably isn't the ideal image for the target audience. I don't even think that this is the worst part. In the end, when the date arrives and he reveals this big meal that he made, it's actually just the grossest and creepiest looking thing ever, and it had me feeling very glad that I was only watching a cartoon. The dinner has eyeballs, bloody bones, a severed human foot, and a rolled up tongue that unfortunately unrolls and then twitches before being covered up again. It's a pile of gross, not really food. I could get past that except for the fact that they actually eat it. I just hate that so much. All in all, this whole thing is just very bizarre, and the ending leaves you with a super uncomfortable feeling. In our number 4 spot today we have Ed, Edd, and Eddy. I personally loved this show as a kid. It was so wacky and wild, but this rumored lost episode definitely doesn't seem like a good time. Legend has it that this lost episode is one that accidentally aired back in 2003. It is said that one day there was supposed to be a rerun of an already aired episode, but instead viewers found themselves watching something much more creepy. Apparently the characters were acting weird and the animation was super choppy. From here, in the last 3 minutes of the episode, claymation characters start to take over, and the episode in general is just really strange and uncomfortable and eerie. People on the internet have said that the episode was just wrong on all levels, and it left them with just a really sinister feeling. In our number 3 spot today we have the Powerpuff Girls. Sugar, spice, and everything nice, the Powerpuff Girls is a classic show that might be surprising to see on this list, unless you have seen or at least heard of this rumored lost episode. While usual episodes of the show saw our 3 superheroes Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup along with their creator Professor Utonium just kicking butt and taking names, this lost episode is said to have shown something much darker. This episode is said to follow Professor Utonium as he encounters a terrifying, dark, zombie-like version of Bubbles. Apparently this Bubbles is on some sort of killing rampage. Yeah. Definitely not the type of Powerpuff episode we're used to seeing. In our number 2 spot today we have Ren and Stimpy. This lost episode of Ren and Stimpy is said to have been titled Man's Best Friend. Rumor has it that this episode was meant to be aired during the original run of the 2nd season, but it never ended up making it to air. This is because it was said to be too controversial. The most important or controversial scene in question from this lost episode is said to have seen Ren getting really violent. In this outburst, people said he was seen smoking cigars after he harmed and almost took someone's life. Rumor has it that the creation of this episode got one of the show's creators fired. This lost episode apparently stayed hidden and didn't air until 11 years later, when that rumored fired creator was able to air it on Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, which was the revival of the original series on Spike. In our number 1 spot today we have Barney and Friends. This is said to be a lost episode of Barney and Friends that recently came to light on TikTok. Many users were claiming that they were now remembering this dark episode that they had watched many years ago, and people were claiming that this episode was so dark it made them feel basically traumatized. While Barney and Friends usually had episodes that taught us the value of friendship and good relationships, this episode is said to have a much darker tone and allegedly only aired one single time. The episode in question is said to have been called Death, and many people have claimed that when the theme music started to play, you could hear a sort of creepy whispering just behind the music. After this, everything seemed to return to normal until Barney awoke. When Barney spoke, it was both the sound of his normal giggly voice, but there was also something darker behind it, like another voice underneath that was lower and just sinister sounding. Apparently, this is the episode where Barney said that he was going to teach about death. People on TikTok have said that the episode ends with Barney going on a rampage and killing all of his friends on set, and at the end, he's still saying the classic "I love you, you love me" song, but just in a bit more of a screamy, demonic way than I think any of us are probably used to. So yeah, while I'm not entirely sure this episode ever existed, if it did, I think it's probably for the best that it stays lost in the past.